Great. Thank you all that have joined already. And I see some people starting to introduce themselves in the chat. So thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're at. I'm Abraham Baca or Abe Baca. I'm on the leadership board for Latinxs and Sustainability. And I'm excited and honored to be here with you all today, joined by two wonderful panelists, Ayla and Tamarin, who we'll introduce in a moment. And we're here to talk about careers in the clean tech industry. So we'll have a quick presentation, but most of it will be the panel discussion and Q&As. So really quickly, just some goals for this session. We really want to provide a high-level overview about the clean tech ecosystem and what do potential career paths look like. And more importantly, also connect and learn from Latinx leaders working in this industry. So you'll hear their stories and how they got here. Quick agenda, like I mentioned, we'll go through a quick clean tech introduction. This will be very high level, but just for some context setting. Then we'll introduce our speakers and really dive into the panel conversation. We will have time for audience Q&A, so I definitely encourage you all to drop your questions in the Q&A function of the chat, as we will be looking at those. So yeah, just to get started and for context setting, like really clean tech is the use of technology to reduce or eliminate negative impacts on the environment. This is very broad. This is a very high level overview, but really it's just trying to minimize any impacts on the environment. So one thing we wanted to share with this slide is that there's a broad range of clean tech sectors. So clean tech can be across energy, transportation, how we use our land for growing food, anything from buildings, manufacturing, supply chain, the built environment, you name it. And one thing that this chart shows is just how investment has been growing a lot significantly over the past 4 years in this new like clean tech interest. And so that just presents a lot of room for opportunities and continued growth. And really the one thing we want to highlight here is, as you can see, clean tech can be very broad. There's different players and organizations within this industry, from startups who are like young companies trying to solve a new problem, investors who are investing in these startups, and then also, accelerators, universities, corporations, and government who might serve as customers or other support system that provide other resources to support these startups. So really it's a broad industry with a lot of different players, and they all serve their different role, like purpose and functions. And just at the bottom, we want to highlight that regardless of what your background or your experience is, there's roles for everyone in the clean tech sector. Finance, engineering, customer service, legal, operations, you name it. So yeah, really it's exciting because clean tech and sustainability touches every industry, every function. And so there's definitely different ways of working in this space. But yeah, most importantly, the reason we're here today, we want to have this panel discussion. As I mentioned, I'm Abe Baca. I'm on the leadership team for Latinxs and Sustainability. I have a civil engineering background, and then I pursued a graduate degrees at University of Michigan, where I studied an MBA and Master's in Sustainability. And that's really where I learned about innovation, startups, and the role that like innovation is going to play within clean tech and sustainability as we transition to a more like sustainable economy. And so I've worked with accelerators and also an internship role at an investor. And so I'm excited. I'll pass it over to Ayla to please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Abe. Hey, everyone. It's great to have you with us today. My name is Ayla Olvera. I live in Chicago, but I'm currently in South Dakota on a hiking trip. But I wanted to make sure to be able to be here, be present, and share a bit more about my experience working in clean tech. So my experience has primarily been centered around improving supply chains for large tech companies and working to keep electronics out of landfills. So I look forward to our discussion today and happy to answer any questions you might have. Pass it on to Tamron.
Hey guys, I'm Tamron, originally from Iowa, but now just like many of you in the chat, it looks like I'm living in Austin, Texas. I'm in Texas more broadly, but I've been in CleanTech for about 3 years now, or CleanTech adjacent. I'm currently with an EV charging company in sales. But yeah, I love everything about CleanTech, decided to pivot my career, and happy to take any questions, and also happy just to be here and be able to talk about it.
Thank you both. Yeah, and so to get started, can you share a little bit more about how you got started in CleanTech, like what your background is, maybe either academic background and work experience background? Ayla, we can start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the way I started out in this space, I kind of knew I always wanted to work in CleanTech, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't even know how to get started. So I had like a past life, as I like to say, before I started to work in this space. I served in the Peace Corps for a few years, and I took advantage of opportunities to work and support different projects within the community I was serving. And I realized when I gave myself the like space and time to think about how I wanted to contribute and give back to the world through my professional career, I knew I wanted to combine my perspective in my business undergrad and my passion for the environment. And so I realized that by combining those two, I can help to improve business practices for corporations, both big and small. So knowing that, I decided to pursue my MBA. And during the internship interviewing processes for full-time roles, I made sure to share my unique perspective and skill set to companies that were looking to improve on their operations, to improve within their supply chain, to be more sustainable. So that's really what brought me to this space, is knowing realistically the background and education that I had, my lived experiences and my passions around the environment and sustainability. And so in doing that, I was able to find that there are a lot of growing opportunities within the supply chain and improving supply chain efficiencies and identifying potentially waste. And this is one of those areas where I think people don't often think, like, how does supply chain help sustainability or help the environment? And it has a lot to do with both services and moving parts, and finding ways to make the movement of those services and products a lot more efficient, which then use less energy, which then emit less into the atmosphere. So all that to say, it's a good combination of a couple of different experiences, but both combination of educational background, experiences, and passions are what really brought me to the CleanTech space.
Yeah, for myself, I think, so me getting into CleanTech was a little bit of a interesting background. So what I thought my career was going to be was I was going to be the stereotypical finance bro. I was going to go grab a finance degree in college, work in real estate forever. Very quickly realized that wasn't for me, and the industry is very slow moving. Because of one of my buddies, he is more on the conservation side of like loving the planet. Still a climate change advocate and all that stuff, but didn't really know much about the technology. But because of what he was like saying to me, I was like, okay, I'll look into it. I picked up Bill Gates's book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, which really kind of touches on how business and innovation can lead us to better outcomes. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is where I should spend my career. So I joined more of a sustainability and fashion company at one point. And then after my time there ended, I was like, okay, that was good, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted, and making as big of an impact as what I thought I could have, which is when I decided I was going like climate tech or clean tech or bust in my career, whereas either I was working in the industry or I wasn't. So it was, rather than like the slow approach that Ayla kind of went through, it was much more of a very hard and fast approach for me over the course of the last like 2 or 3 years. But nonetheless, still found myself here, and now obviously working in sales, get a get to go back to the real estate side of things in the current industry of EV charging. So it all kind of came together in the long run.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing. And obviously it's clear, and it was one of our goals with this session to demonstrate, the broad spectrum of like experiences and what it can look like, both from working at large corporates to the startup life. So thank you both for sharing that. The next question we wanted to touch on is if you can dive, Ayla, you started talking a little bit about this, but like, what are some of the major tasks or challenges that you've been that you've worked on in your career, in your roles with your respective organizations, and like what has been fulfilling from those careers?
Yeah. So
Go for it. Yeah, go for it, Tim.
Perfect. I would say being in a sales role within like climate tech and lowering emissions, or right now within EV, it's interesting, especially because I'm also in real estate. So you get a lot of very interesting personalities to deal with. I remember one time I was calling into a guy in New York City who owned real estate, and he started ranting at me about politics and being all these things. He was very Republican and did not lean at all into believing in climate change. We still eventually made the sale, and it's like, that's one of those challenges that's amazing, is like, even if this guy doesn't believe in anything I'm doing, he still found the value, or doesn't believe in the things that I believe in, he still found the value in like what we're selling and the amount of savings on a monetary amount, but then also the emissions that is able to benefit him. So in the sales role, that's one of those fun little benefits of like either changing people's perspectives or showing them the value and acting more climate conscious is not just a good earth case, it's also a good business case.
Yeah, that's a great one, because I have a similar experience. So just to give you a little bit of background, while I was working at Intel, I worked in a group that was helping to design mini PCs. They're called NUCs, Next Unit of Computing. They typically are found on like billboards or kiosks at airports and things like that. So they're small little form factor PCs, but they're super mighty. And our goal was to design the most sustainable PC on the market. So that meant like improving everything from the design concept of the device all the way through end of life. And so our team's goal was to basically educate, influence, and support every implementation of this update of this product across different programs and across all of our internal teams, so that they can go ahead and execute it. So it all sounds good in theory. Who doesn't want a product to be more efficient, to be more sustainable? But what made it challenging was that at the end of the day, Intel's still a business, and you still have to be able to sell the products to stay in business. And it can be challenging sometimes to convince business leaders to approve an increase in per unit cost, right? And so the way that we got around that is we wanted to go fast, and we wanted the next generation of the product to be out and to be the greatest and latest thing that we can manufacture and produce. But the reality is that we needed to sell this to decision makers. And so part of what I do and what our team does was having to proposition these changes and these improvements in a way that make business sense, with us knowing that there's obviously another incentive to it, another benefit from it. And so what I learned from that, although it was challenging at times, was to know your audience, right? Know who you're pitching to, know what they care about. If all they care about is the bottom line, then don't talk about all the sustainability stuff, because it's just going to go over their head. And so at times that was challenging, because it is such a passionate subject for me and for our team. But we realized that oftentimes it just comes down to that bottom line, that end of that like additional cost per unit decision. And if we can't justify that, and we're not going to pass it down to customers, maybe it's not the best thing to do at the moment. But what we learned was adjust, frame, know who you're speaking, know who your audience is, frame your position, and most of the time you'll end up getting the yes or the yes with a little asterisk. But you learn a lot about not just like changes throughout the supply chain, but you also learn a lot about how to position your argument, for lack of a better way of saying that, to benefit the business, but also benefit the environment.
Great. Thank you both. We have one more question, and in the meantime, I want to remind everyone to please drop any questions you have in the Q&A function, and we will definitely get to those right after this during our Q&A session. But yeah, just to kind of wrap up at least this part of the discussion, would love to hear from each of you, like, what's your experience been like as a Latiné professional in this industry? Either any like challenges or opportunities that you feel like you've been able to take advantage of, bringing, you know, your whole self and your background and your experience to your roles.
Tam, do you want to go first? Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I guess I can. I would say from my perspective of being at a handful of startups at this point, it is very, how to say this? It's a very, there's not a bunch of Latinx folks in the industry, so it's always a quiet place, but there's a lot of impact that can be made. Thinking of like, my dad's from LA and I grew up in Iowa, so entirely different experiences, but thinking about how those two go together of like, for example, with me and EV, pushing forward these type of paths is so impactful to a city like Los Angeles, where car emissions results to so many respiratory diseases in that city, most notably on the freeways where Black and brown folks live. So that's one of the most impactful things, is to like be able to sit there and be like, okay, what I'm doing does have a 1-to-1 correlation to the people that I care most about. I would say that's something to think about when you go into these. How can I make the most, like these sort of opportunities do have the most impact, but so much economic impact as well as to what we can do for our people.
Yeah, and so from my perspective, I have felt very supportive. I've been very fortunate to work for organizations that value diversity and that have not just support groups or DEI groups that support myself and other folks who have diverse backgrounds. But I was also very fortunate to be a part of a mentorship program that was specifically targeted towards Latinas and Latinos within Intel who were looking to elevate their careers and learn from mentors who were in the C-suite. So I was partnered with our VP of supply chain for a year and had him as a resource for a year to ask questions, understand maybe where the business was going. We would meet to plan out, career objectives. And so by having an hour with this exec, every couple of weeks was a big differentiator. This is a company and an individual who is extremely busy, who was willing to invest time into my development and getting to know myself better. So I've been very fortunate. I've absolutely taken advantage of all the DEI groups that exist within the organizations that I've been a part of, because women, and in particular Latinas in tech, there's a few of us. We are definitely growing, but there's still a smaller number of us. And so when we come together, it kind of strengthens not just our network, but it strengthens and empowers each of us to go out into our respective groups and our organizations with a backing of other successful women in tech, but also with an added level of resources who they've always been willing to connect you with other folks. So I personally have had a really positive experience. Maybe sometimes getting outside of my comfort zone has helped, putting myself out there, making sure that I'm networking as much as possible, because it's not always obvious that folks are Latinos or Latinas. So it's really important to be proud of who you are, speak up, network with folks. And at the same time, I also make an effort to help others who are, earlier on in their career, who have questions about getting into tech or working within sustainability. And so for me, at least, I've reaped the benefits of individuals pulling me up. And so I have found that a good way of expanding your network and and helping the next generation of powerful Latinos and Latinas is to look back and like replicate the support and the help that others have provided and replicate that for the future generations. And if we could just do that for like one person every so often, I think we can be a lot more powerful in that unity. So that's my own experience. I've had some, I would say it's been definitely more positive than anything else.
Awesome. And yeah, I think one thing I'll add really quickly is just as this interest in sustainability is growing broadly, there's a lot of opportunities, not just job opportunities, but also cleaner homes and environments where we live. And so a lot of these companies that are growing, they're consumer-based companies. They consumer or, our tios, our tias, our abuelitos, abuelitas are going to be potential customers. And how do you reach those customers? Like, you need someone that can speak that language, that can connect and communicate with them and earn that trust, right? And so I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities and and it's critical for us to be in those spaces so that we can make sure, we know what's best for our communities. And so, yeah, thank you both for sharing. We have the first question, and this is for you, Tamron. What did your educational path look like going from finance bro to clean initiatives?
Yeah, so being from Iowa, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. Took a math class, understood what compound interest was, and I was like, okay, that sounds fun to me. So studied finance in undergrad and got that real estate double major, and became very active on the real estate side of things. So that's kind of what my finance bro path looked like, where it was a lot of, it's very stereotypical towards the back end of my college career. It was like, okay, hop on the Robinhood app and watch stocks rise. Unfortunately, they fell a few years later, but nonetheless, that's kind of what the finance bro path looked like. The transition was, okay, I don't really care the role I'm going to get here. I know my business degree can get me into some doors. Where do I think I can make the most impact? And that's kind of how I just settled on sales, and then with the hopes to transition that into a full career, most likely out of selling eventually. But it's kind of where, everyone that needs to know it. So I figured it was a good place for me to at least get started in the climate tech side of things.
Thank you. And staying on the educational topic, Ayla, maybe you can share a little bit about your decision to pursue an MBA and, how you process that. Did you find how that has helped you in your career?
Yeah, and I knew that at least with my undergrad, which is business management, I knew that based off of my own research and what I wanted to accomplish, there was this gap. And so for me, my path, the best decision for me was to go back to school and get my master's degree. And within my master's program, I chose a program that allowed me to take a deeper dive into supply chain management, because that's where I realized I had, both that combination of experience, but also passion for the topic, and knowing that I can bring that as a skill set into organizations that, move products and services around, and who were looking to do that more efficiently. So again, within my, when I was talking to companies about the experience that I had going into my MBA, during my MBA, I was able to pitch that as a way of like, hey, look at my passion for sustainability and the environment. And a lot of that was present in examples and projects that I worked at while I was in the Peace Corps. And I had a business background. I had a whole, business career before my MBA. Typically, folks who do their MBA have a couple years of professional work experience before they apply to business school. And so I had the background within the business sector, had my experience within Peace Corps that cemented my passion for sustainability, and then joining that together with my focus around supply chain management in my master's program really helped to align my story really well for recruiters and for companies to say, okay, this is how I got from being an individual at like 22 who just had a business management profession or degree, and now I want to do responsible sourcing for a Fortune 50 company. And so those experiences, my educational background, my internships, all contributed to that endpoint of being able to pitch my experience, my skill set to companies. And so everyone has a different path. I've met folks on my team who have completely different backgrounds from myself, but it's really about your own story and making sure that the story that you're telling makes sense for what your goal is. And that's advice I would give to anyone. It took me a while to learn it, but I feel like if you give yourself the time and space to figure it out for yourself, it'll become a lot more clear. At least that's what's worked for me.
Thank you. Thank you both. Our next question is, any advice for people wanting to find opportunities in sustainable tech? I'll take a quick start. Actually, I'll put this up now. We were going to get to it at the end, but just some additional resources. Really quickly, one thing I will mention is like we shared, clean tech, sustainable tech is very broad. And so thinking about it in one of two ways and trying to narrow down your specific interest. I think one is what industry or what particular sector within climate are you most interested in? That could be water, transportation, energy, supply chain, like materials, clothes, food, you name it. And so what are you most interested in? That could also take into account your background and your experience, what industries you've worked on. And I would say the second piece is your experience and your skill set. Like, what type of function or role would you like to be? Because if you just want to approach just like clean tech, sustainable tech very broadly, that's going to be a challenge. And so being at least somewhat focused or having at least some guardrails, if you will, into what you're looking for. You don't necessarily, you can be open on sector, but you might know, oh, I want to work in finance, I want to work in marketing, etc. That will definitely help. Or vice versa, I really have a passion for energy. I want to be in the energy space. But then you still would want to identify like an ideal function. Yeah, I get either anything else to add.
I would just say, so the way that I first got my role into this industry was, I don't know how many folks are very familiar with how startups work, but the folks that invest in our venture capital firms, and most likely they have a job board to help their portfolio companies. So if you find like an industry that you're very passionate about, or like a silo that you're passionate about, find who the investors are and go to their job boards. And then, because typically, well, at least for some of those, their job boards are not like the only reason why these companies and venture capital firms know about these job boards is because they're that tied into these companies. They're not like widely publicized jobs. So it could be a little bit easier path forward within some of these companies. So that would be my number one suggestion if you think you want to go the startup route.
Yeah, for me, I would the only addition I would add one more thing to my point of advice. Once you find something that you enjoy, or like a part of the business or part of the tech sector that you like, become an expert in that niche. So if you are working in renewables, find a niche that you're passionate about that sets you apart from other candidates. So if you're really good with people and you want to work in renewable space, maybe like Tamron, you could be on the sales side of things, on the business development side of things. If you want to be an individual contributor, you just want to be in the background, maybe you want to do finance for an accounting firm that's looking to do climate accounting or something different. So the industry is really broad, but I would say find a space that you're passionate about, that you have some level of skill set to bring to the table, and then become an expert in that space. And that'll set you apart from other candidates, because you're able to say, this is why I've decided to specialize in this part of CleanTech. So hopefully that helps out.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we are over time. I will leave these resources up. If anyone has any other questions, you can find all three of us on LinkedIn. You can, if you're interested in connecting or learning more about Latinxs and sustainability, you can find us on our website, LinkedIn group, or both mine and Melina's emails are here. Please reach out. We'll see how we can share this deck as well out, or if not, just send me an email and I'd be happy to share it with anyone. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Ayla. Thank you, Tamarin, for your insights and sharing your experience with us. And thank you all for joining and being present and engaging. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.